Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth.
As we approach the first presidential election since the January 6th insurrection, we are seeing shadows of a resurgence of a far-right political movement of the past. Our next guest has a look at how the John Birch Society's teachings are being mirrored in the Trump MAGA movement.
First of all, I've been telling you about the John Birch Society since at least 2017 with my now classic video, Why Roger Ailes Isn't Going Away. And just this past Sunday, I reminded you again with my takedown of Bethany Mandel. The best way to find out what the enemy is doing is to follow the money, because that's what white supremacy's power is based on. See who's paying for these right-wing nuts like Rufo and Mandel to be put on TV, and who's able to pay for them to get publicity. And when you follow the money, you see the same handful of organizations, which are funded by the same handful of wealthy conservative ideologues, and they're the ones who keep putting out this racist rhetoric. The white right took a beating 3 years back, and combined with the demoralizing of seeing a biracial man in the White House a few years earlier with his 100% black wife, that was enough for them to go off the deep end. Not that they were very far from it already. So the strategy now is political scorched earth. And it's being carried out by many of the richest, most well-established and powerful entities in the country. Occasionally you've heard me talk about so-called accelerationists. Now, what that means is you got these white supremacists who want to speed up what they see as inevitable collapse of American society. These white supremacists, like the Proud Boys, Three Percenters, and Oath Keepers, they think that they can use the chaos of a broken American society to start killing people, black people that is, with the stockpiles of guns that they've amassed, and then they can institute their glorious white ethno-state. In their minds, the fall of America is a fait accompli, and they think they'll take complete advantage of it through violence. But first they got to bring it down now, right now. As they see it, American society, which means the absolutely white-oriented racialist paradigm, is in freefall. To them, they only have a little while before a white non-Hispanic becomes a minority nationwide. So they're in a crisis. Up until now, for hundreds of years, the rationale they've been using for why they're in the position they're in is because they're the majority. And that's just the way it is, because of the demographics. But the demographics have been changing. So as they see it, they only have a few years to try to declare permanent white rule. What you're seeing in Florida is not some attention-seeking exercise alone. What they're doing is they're showing you what they want American society to be. And they already know that they're not the majority, but as they see it, history has shown that it's usually a mobilized, well-armed minority who are able to take over a country and institute their rule over everyone else. That's what they think this is all going to lead to. Recently, the Florida GOP legislature announced a bill that would demand anyone who so much as mentions Ron DeSantis' name or the names of any Florida state legislative members to have to register themselves with the state and give the legislature all their personal income information as well. And if you refuse, you would be subjected to a fine. This is exactly what Vladimir Putin has done in Russia, by the way. If you disagree with any of his policies, if you even have one penny that comes from outside of Russia, you are labeled a foreign agent. And by state law, you must declare that on anything you say publicly, be it blog posts, Twitter posts, YouTube videos, whatever. If you post something on Twitter, you have to post that you are a foreign agent. If you post something on YouTube, you have to start your videos with a disclaimer saying you're a foreign agent. Failure to do so results in fines and a prison sentence. Even the fools in white leftist media cable who try to claim, well, the Republicans are flirting with fascism, now they have no choice but to admit that the Republicans are wholesale consummating the relationship. The white media keeps lying because that's their job, as if what DeSantis and his racist pals are doing in Florida is just a political stunt and nothing more. It's meant to get them some attention, and that they don't actually mean any of the things that they're doing. The truth, however, is that the white media likes a number of these measures, because as we've explained in the black media many times, the white media was attacking woke long before DeSantis and his pals started doing so. Obama, James Carville, Jim Clyburn, they attacked demands that the police be punished as being woke and say you gotta stop it with all this. The first real attack on woke from politicians didn't start with the Republicans. It started with the Democrats, and it had to do with the police. The white media and the white left share as much anti-black hatred as the white right, so as they see it, letting the GOP put laws in place that attack black activism and black free speech is useful to the white left because they also want the same thing. But what the white media, even the so-called left media, won't say is that even if you believe DeSantis is simply going to extremes just to get attention, you can't deny that the wealthy right-wing donors who fund him and the GOP are not joking at all. These laws are exactly what they've been talking about for decades now, and it's not just for show. For them, this is a real war that they're waging. The racist, sheltered plutocrats like Robert Mercer, the billionaire tech investor who helped to fund Trump's campaign, William Regnery, who was the Deep Pockets publisher behind Richard Spencer and the alt-right, these are the kinds of individuals that dyed-in-the-wool ideologues who have been pushing the kind of right-wing extremism that you're seeing in Florida and other states. When you hear people like Tucker Carlson, who himself comes from a family that's handed down generational wealth from father to child, talking about America being only for the right kind of people who believe the right things and that being American is a mindset. Well, being American is more than just if you were born here. It's also a mindset, too. And exactly whose mindset is his kind talking about? Whose mindset defines American? Theirs. The GOP is not turning authoritarian. They're not becoming fascists. They have always been fascist. This is just them putting aside all pretense. Even so, you have the white leftist media trying to whitewash it and not alienate all those casual racists, read white moderates, who they're hoping to woo from Fox News. They try to ever so slightly minimize the racism because they too want to appeal to the exact same demographic. They want to try to grow their audience so that they can get more advertiser revenue. So they can't say what's going on. And speaking of rewriting history, we have the brain-dead commentary of Joe the Schmo Scarborough, who I should remind you tried to defend the murder of Tamir Rice by claiming that the toy gun's orange tip had been removed and that's what the cops saw. He and Mika Brzezinski both were doing that. But when the video became public showing that the police skidded to a halt and shot that child dead in less than 3 seconds, completely contradicting the police's own false report, by the way, Scarborough and Brzezinski, rather than admit they were wrong, they just dropped the issue altogether and stopped talking about it.
When Ronald Reagan first started campaigning in 1966, a lot of John Birchers supported him, and he was told pretty early on that he had to distance himself, and he came out with a pithy statement. I know Matthew will know it far better than me, but something along the lines of, if they support me, they're going to have to support my views, not vice versa.
This same Joe Scarborough now tells us that when Ronald Reagan was running to become governor of California in '66, he was told to distance himself from the John Birch Society. And Scarborough says Reagan replied that they will have to support his views, not vice versa. After that, Scarborough immediately hurries away without adding anything else. This is how the white media miseducates and indoctrinates the public, by giving half-truths and selectively edited snippets. Well, where I'm from, if you're not telling the entire truth, you've told a whole lie. While Scarborough is trying to invent fairy tales about what Reagan was doing in the 60s and 70s, let me tell you what he actually did. Just a little over 6 months into his first term, he signed into law the Mulford Act, which was the first gun ban in the United States and which was also endorsed and supported by the National Rifle Association. Why did Ronald Reagan, a Republican, do that? Because the Mulford Act was a direct response to the Black Panthers exercising their Second Amendment right to bear arms, which they did publicly, in front of police stations. Neither Reagan nor the NRA nor anyone else cared about white racist Klansmen carrying rifles in public, many of them being police and sheriff's deputies. But when black people exercise their right to bear arms, there needs to be a law. So much for conservatives believing in the right of citizens to bear arms, huh? But Reagan wasn't done yet. In 1971, while still governor of California, he called Richard Nixon. In fact, the very first video I posted on this YouTube channel was about that phone call. Even if you've already seen it, it's certainly worth reviewing. The reason that then Governor Reagan made that call was because he was furious that African delegates to the UN chose to recognize the People's Republic of China as members of the UN, and they expelled Taiwan, which has been simply known as the Republic of China. Reagan was infuriated when he saw African dignitaries celebrating that outcome. So Reagan called up his buddy Tricky Dick to cry on his shoulder.
Last night, I tell you, to watch that thing on television as I did.
Yeah.
To see those monkeys from those African countries. Damn them, they're still uncomfortable wearing shoes.
Well, and then the tail wags the dog there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The tail wags the dog. I, for example, just had a call from Reagan, California, and he's been out there and so forth, and as you can imagine, there's strong feeling that we just shouldn't. As he said, he saw these cannibals on television last night, and he said they weren't even wearing shoes, and he says here the United States is going to submit its fate to that, and so forth and so on, and but that's typical of a reaction which is probably quite strong.
Gee, you don't think this might have had anything to do with why the John Birch Society was so supportive of Ronald Reagan's gubernatorial bid, do you? Also, on a side note, had it not been for the efforts of black Americans like Walter White, Israel would never have existed. It was black Americans who were the only ones seen as having the moral legitimacy to persuade the African nations to withdraw their opposition to Israel being recognized as a state by the UN. Well, now that we've had a peek at what Reagan was up to when he was governor of California, I think we understand now what he meant when he said the John Birch Society would have to change their views to support his. What he meant was the Birchers would have to become more radically racist like he was. And one more thing that Scarborough conveniently left out. When Ronald Reagan ran for president in 1980, he began his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Now, a lot of you didn't even know there was a town called Philadelphia, Mississippi. Well, there's not much to the place. Even today, it only has a population of a little under 7,000 people. So why would Ronald Reagan, governor of California, visit a tiny hamlet in Mississippi that didn't have any big money and doesn't have any people there? Why would he begin his presidential campaign in that place in particular? What made it so important when nobody even knew it existed? It was because there's one thing, and one thing only, that Philadelphia, Mississippi is known for. It's the place where the three civil rights workers, Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner, were murdered in 1964 by sheriff's deputies. Just 2 years before Reagan allegedly was telling the John Birch Society that they would have to support his views. That's what was going on at the time that Reagan was running for governor of California, and clearly he kept that little incident in mind. Ronald Reagan began his campaign for the presidency in that little tiny hole-in-the-wall town because he wanted to make it clear he stood for racist violence against black people, and that he was the white man's candidate. This is why the John Birch Society supported Reagan's gubernatorial bid, and this is what Joe Scarborough didn't tell you. That's why you need the black media. I've posted a hell of a lot of videos on this channel, I'll tell you right now. I do this as a kind of online database of sorts for my people. You should be going through the archives on this channel frequently, because as the black media, a big part of our mission is to be way ahead of the curve, years and years ahead of it. A media is useless to you if it can't tell you what's coming before it gets here. So we talk about Reagan's racism not merely to inform you of what he had done, but also so that when some half-cocked bigot like Joe Scarborough and his wrinkled racist side piece Mika Brzezinski decide to cover up the racism of people like Ronald Reagan, you'll be armed with the facts. You do yourself a great disservice if you don't go back and watch the past videos on this channel and others in the new black media. The bad guys make it a point to visit and revisit the racist propaganda that trash like Ben Shapiro and others put out. You owe it to yourself to become familiar with the truth. I was telling you about the John Birch Society years ago and how the wealthy racists like the Coors and Koch brothers put their money into these racist groups. I've been telling you about the Heritage Foundation, created and funded by wealthy beer magnate Joseph Coors. And why did he create the Heritage Foundation? Because conservative archetype William F. Buckley turned on the John Birch Society and denounced them. And that being the case, Joseph Coors, who had been a big contributor to them, needed a substitute group to shift his money to, so he invented one. But you won't hear this from the white media. Same thing with these think tanks. Both the white left and the white right play the same game, use the same tactics, and do it for the same reason: to control black people. The only true opposition to white supremacy. Neither the Democrats nor the Republicans is trying to help us. They only say what they think they have to try to get us to support their agenda. but nothing that would support ours. Kind of like Reagan saying the Birchers would have to support his views, he wasn't supporting theirs. Replace Reagan with Democrats and Birchers with black people, and you have the exact same dynamic that we get from Clinton, Obama, Hillary, Biden, and all the rest. Places like this are the only places you're going to get the truth. Nobody else is operating in your interest. I don't point you to the past videos on this channel to toot my own horn. I do it to assure you that the information you get here is better than the propaganda you're going to get from the white media. We're years ahead of the curve. The stuff I posted from 2020 is just now coming to pass. Some of it has yet to, which is why even our old stuff is more current and cutting edge than anything the white media has posted today or will post in the next 12 months. By the time you hear about it from the white media, you are months, if not years, behind. So as usual, the white media is pulling up the rear, telling you things you already knew years ago because you actually listened to an actual information source, one that operates in your interest. Now more than ever, it matters who you get your news and views from, because by the time the white media finally gets around to telling you about something, it will already be too late. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Alexandria Sturgeon, Emmanuel Williams, Cyberdyne 100, Rebellious Zoe, and Brian Walton. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.